Welcome to Smart Route, the podcast by CallTrackingMetrics, where you'll hear stories from businesses at the intersection of marketing, customer experience, and sales. We're sitting down with business leaders and industry experts to dive deep into the path they took to find success. Here's your host, Courtney Tyson.
Hello, and welcome to the 13th episode of Smart Route. I'm your host and strategic partnership manager at CallTrackingMetrics, Courtney Tyson. If you can believe it, it's actually been a year since we launched Smart Route and had the opportunity to interview for our very first episode our CallTrackingMetrics co-founders, Laure and Todd Fisher, about how they grew CallTrackingMetrics into a $20 million company. Being that it's our anniversary, we wanted to bring back our very first guests and hear part two of their journey as successful entrepreneurs. And so welcome back, Laure and Todd Fisher.
Good
to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. We're definitely eager to talk to you about the transition you've experienced from being a startup to now a growth company. First and foremost, just want to say congratulations to you on a very successful 2021. In 2021, CallTrackingMetrics saw even higher growth rates, an increase in the number of employees, and we even moved into a brand new state-of-the-art office. So, Laure and Todd, can you tell us a little bit more about, what has changed since we last spoke, both company-wise and priority-wise?
Yeah, I think it's been a tremendous year or so. I think we've grown almost to 30 million in revenue, and we're upwards of over 70 employees now. I think there's been a lot of learnings along the way with the new office space. It's we've also figured out more about how we want to target the product. We've done a lot of discovery around, what is the right audience for our product, and how do we refined our mission statement, which I think has been really key to continuing our growth. What do you think, Laure?
So across the past year, well, I was thinking about the last time we did this, we were all at home. Because last winter we were all at home. So definitely really different because we're, like Todd said, Courtney, you said this, we have our new office. So that's something definitely very different. We're all not at home. So it's been really exciting kind of going through the transition from fully in person, 3 years ago, to fully remote for a year and a half, to now hybrid. With a lot of our employees now. So that's been a really interesting evolution for us as a company. And we're learning a lot about how do you do, we figured out remote after a year and a half, 2 years of doing that. And now we're figuring out hybrid, and it poses all sorts of new things that we have to think about and challenges we have to solve. But it's great. It's such a great balance for, our employees, and it's also been really interesting to think about, like, what is it that people want to come back in person together to do? And that was what we really had to think about with our new office, is like, why are we here? When we're here in person, why are we here? And what are those things we want to do? And how do we make sure that the office is conducive to that and is really, really kind of a place to foster what it is that people want to do together. So that's been a big project across the past year. Like Todd said, we are, we're almost at 30 million in revenue. We have over 70 employees now. We had one of our best years ever last year in terms of year-over-year growth rate, which was really exciting. And like Todd said, I think it's a lot because of across the past year, we've really been working on refining our positioning and really understanding. We're now at a point as a company that we really understand what we do well. And so thinking about how do we really promote that first and foremost, and making sure that we're bringing on customers that are in our power alley of what we do really well. And so, it was an exciting year last year. Lots of things going on.
Yeah, it seems as though having the office has allowed you to really kind of rebuild the foundation, which then kind of goes hand in hand with looking at our mission statement and our culture, and kind of reshaping that as well as we continue to grow and as we build ourselves up within this new office. So, I think it's interesting, we've continued to stay in this growth phase through COVID, through working from home. But what's also rare is that CallTrackingMetrics doesn't have investors. So can you talk to us a little bit more about how that works and also your decision to go in that direction?
Yeah, I've been thinking about a few thoughts with this. So one of them is that, we have a really strong leadership team. So, when we think about investors, and why we might go down that path at some point, part of it would be because we would need to bring someone in who can help us, right, and tell us what we need to do to get to the next phase of growth. And what we've done is we've hired, leaders who have done this before, right? They've set up HR teams, they've, set up finance teams, they've scaled engineering teams, they've scaled product teams. And so, we're still at this point where, we know what we need to do, right? We know we have the experience to know what we need to do to get to that next phase of growth. And, maybe at some point will we reach the point where we're like, none of us know what to do now. Time to bring in some outside help. We might get there. But so far, we all know what we need to do and it's been working. And, we've also we're in a position financially where, our product, we're growing, right? We grow every year. We grew 22% last year over year. And so financially, we're in a position where we don't need to bring on investors to finance the things that we need to do as a company to keep growing. Again, maybe that changes at some point, but for right now, at least, we feel like we've got the resources that we need, both internally and kind of financially, to do what we need to do.
Yeah. I just to add to that, I mean, I think, for me, when I was in college, engineering college, I was computer science, and I'll never forget, I had a material scientist hallmate and a chemical engineering hallmate and a mechanical engineering hallmate. So they were all in different disciplines of engineering. And when it was the end of the year and we needed to do our final projects, for them, it was this huge constraint to get time in the lab, right? They needed to be able to get access to the lab to perform their experiments, right? Well, I was sitting in my dorm room with my laptop, and all I had to do my final experiment or project, whatever, was type on my keyboard, right? So if you think about that in terms of business and capital investment, there was zero capital investment for me, or a very small amount to purchase a laptop, right? Versus the other engineering disciplines, they needed to effectively purchase huge equipment, right, to enable them to do these advanced experiments, right? The same is true when you think about a software business like us, right? In terms of capital investment, it's very small, right? We're talking about, writing software, right? is time, but the machinery required is very limited, right, in terms of costs. So I think that's part of what's enabled us to build a business and not require a lot of capital that other businesses would otherwise have required, right? So I don't know. I think that I've always thought that's a kind of a illuminating experience with respect to a software business and how we can scale with so much less capital.
Sure.
Yeah, so far it seems to work.
Investors aren't needed because you've invested in such great resources in your employees and the leadership team as well. And, you have lots of confidence in all of us.
Yeah.
So let's talk about too, I guess, that transition from, being a startup to a more mature or like this growth company, right? When do you feel like that transition occurred?
I know. I was thinking about this. I know I felt it when we crossed 50 employees.
Yes.
We're at 70 now. And when we crossed 50 employees, things just started to kind of fall apart that used to work fine when we were 10 employees. And I think one of the biggest things is that Todd and I reached the point where we realized like we couldn't be involved in everything at that point. It just, and they say that 50 employees is this kind of, this transitional point in a company. And we really felt that it was hard. We had to really think about doing things in a different way. That was the year that we started our HR team. We brought in an HR director and built an HR team. It's the year we created a product management team. It's the year we created a finance team. It was Todd and I kind of thinking about all these things that we did, just, us, like we interviewed every person, right? We hired every person. We handled all the HR. We handled all the finance. And we reached the point at that point where we couldn't do it all. So we had to really let go of it and bring people in that specialized in that and knew how to do it. And so it's still a transition, I'd say, that's still going on, right? It's even now that we're at 70 employees, it takes time, and we're building up the internal processes and the things that need to be in place to make sure that everybody knows what they need to be doing without Todd and I personally talking to them about it every day.
Which we'd still enjoy doing. It's just
Yeah.
there's not enough hours in the day.
Yes. Yeah, and
Makes sense.
it's also like, I think one of the big transitions that happened then too is, as a company, those first run up, the run up to 50 employees, it was all about just growing, right? It was all about bring in more customers, grow revenue, grow. And at that point, we also had to start thinking about, like, well, wait a minute, like, how many customers do we actually keep?
Sure.
How long
Oh
do we
yeah.
stay a customer? What does our churn look like? How much does it cost to support a customer? And how do we make sure that we're really fulfilling the promise that we're making in sales conversations? So we invested a lot of resources in customer success, as we were crossing 50 employees, and really turning attention to the post sales process, and how do we actually keep customers, and getting a handle on what does churn look like at different points in the customer journey. And so that was definitely a transition for us as a company too. And the way that we all thought, it wasn't just about selling, right? It was also about supporting customers and really growing them and helping to grow their business.
Yeah.
It's cool how you can kind of put like an actual number, right, on when you felt that transition occur, that 50 employee mark, when you were like, we have 50 employees, we can't wear every hat. It's just not possible. It's neat. You can kind of, put a number to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, our employees and our office culture have played a, huge role in our growth trajectory. So talk a little bit more, about that, our hybrid office, our emphasis on diversity, and our, hiring strategy. How has all of that kind of played into how we've grown?
I think if you think about the beginning of COVID, when we went fully remote, and then when we decided to come back and we decided to make this investment in this office space, we reflected a lot on what that would look like, and how to make that important. Like, I think the idea that we all come back together on the same days. If you recall, we kind of experimented a little bit where we said, hey, it's up to individuals to decide what days of the week they want to come back or not. And quickly we noticed that, like, we would be back in the office. This is in the old office when we were on different floors too. And it was easier or more common just to stay at your desk and Zoom to meetings with people, right? Because half the team was remote that day, right? So it kind of was like, well, let's just everyone get on a virtual meeting. And so when we made the decision to buy this office and bring everyone back into the office in a hybrid capacity like we have done, I think one of the really important things we did is we said, hey, let's make sure that we're all back in the office on the same days, right? That way, the days that we're here, it's actually really meaningful to be in person together, right? So we could do things together. And I think that was one of the best decisions we made. I mean, was it an easy decision? No, but I think if you think about it from an impact perspective and a, communication with your peers perspective, like, you get better interactions when you're all together than when you're like half in the room and half not in the room. And so, of course, I mean, we do have remote employees, and so it's not, perfect. But I think it's a pretty good approximation for that. Because the other thing I wanted to get was this feeling of you're in a conference, right? What's that energy you have when you go to a conference and there's like, it's, the beginning of the conference and everyone's really pumped up about it. And they're excited about what's happening, that energy you share with the other people in the conference. And I always kind of thought when we come back to the office, I wanted to feel like that. And so actually, I feel like we've maybe kind of gotten close to that, because being in the office 3 days a week means that, there's plenty of recoup time. And then, it's a little bit more high energy maybe when we're together in the office than it was previously, where it was 5 days and, we get kind of worn out. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on that. And there's more, right? So diversity and how we make sure we hire, in an unbiased way, with, I think has been really important too. What do you think, Laurie?
I think as we think about the evolution of our culture, it's interesting that, when we were small, like every person we hired was forming the culture, right? It was, each person we brought in was kind of making the culture. And especially when we were small, it felt like almost kind of a group of friends working together, right? Because a lot of our hires were referrals, somebody knew somebody. It was a very kind of homogeneous group in a way, and we all kind of worked together almost like friends working together. And we didn't really define our culture because it was really just, each of us were kind of defining it as we go. And so, across the past few years, we've had to really regularly actually just kind of talk about our culture and talk about what it is, and to recognize that it continues to evolve. And as you move from the startup to growth phase, it's how do you hold on to the nuggets of what was really special about you when you were in that startup phase and bring them forward through this growth phase. Some of it has to go. The first time we put together our values, it's funny because when we look at them now, we all kind of laugh. Because when we first put them together, we thought they were great. We were 15 employees putting together our values. We're like, yes, these are awesome. And as we looked at them then like 3 years later, we're like, oh my God, like what were we thinking with these values? They had profanity in them. Like, what were we thinking? And so each time we look at it, we have a slightly different perspective because our culture's evolved and the world around us has evolved. But there's these nuggets of things that each time we evolve them, they stay true. Things like innovation and the purpose that we work with, and or the focus on our customers. Those things stay through. It's just we think about them in slightly different ways. I think the other thing is, we never talked about culture when we hired people. We just kind of threw them in and like, hey, get to know everybody. And now we have to be more purposeful where we talk about the culture. We teach them about the culture. We tell them the history about how we got there and why each value is really important as we think about our mission. We can't just assume that everybody can kind of put those pieces together. We have to really educate people on them and why they're important to us. So that's definitely been something that's different. And then on diversity, as we grew so organically, right? Like I said, like it was referrals. It was, I know somebody used to work with them 5 years ago. Yeah, they might be good. It was a very, very kind of organic way that we hired people. Todd and I interviewed every single person. We just waited for people to come to us, right? We'd post something, wait for them to come to us. And now, our hiring process is so different now, where we're really, we're reaching out to the people that we think are the right people for this role, and sourcing candidates in a whole different way. And also being purposeful in how we hire from the perspective of diversity, because if you just kind of hire all your friends, you're not going to have a diverse group of opinions necessarily coming into the organization. And as we think about our mission being so focused on our customers and their customers, like that's a very diverse group that we're trying to serve. So we have to be a diverse company in order to be able to effectively support our customers and to keep that pace of innovation. So we had to, as a company, make that transition where we were purposefully thinking about our hiring and making sure that we were reflecting a diverse group of candidates, even kind of coming into the hiring pipeline, so that we ultimately get to the right decisions that are a diverse group of people coming into the company. So it definitely was a different way of thinking. Like, when you first start out, you want the easy path with hiring, where you're like, oh yeah, I know this guy. Let's just bring him in. It'll be easy. We don't have to have a recruiter. Just just bring him in. Hopefully it works out. Where now we really think like, who's the best person for this role? What do they bring to the organization? And it's been great to see. I commend our HR team. They've done a fantastic job with it across the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think what's so special about our culture is that it's very healthy, it's very positive, and I think that's a tribute to, the fact that you as leaders are constantly looking at our values and our mission and just making sure that they evolve as we evolve and we change. And I think too, a huge part of our culture is the diversity, right? Having so many diverse opinions and ideas. It's just been very kind of exciting to watch and see change as time goes on. So, so What are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give to other startups looking to reach a new level of growth?
Mm. Shoot for the moon. If you miss, you'll land among the stars. Never surrender.
It's a cute little cat poster in your office.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there is something to it. You just never give up, I guess, but always be listening to the customer. They're the most important part of your business from the perspective of you have a business because of them. And focus on your employees. They're going to make the business and your customers happy. They're going to, they're the most important asset you have. I'm sure, Laure, you have some really good thoughts on this too.
I think invest in people who have done this before. I think it's really important, especially for those areas. As you're moving from startup to growth, there's those areas that you naturally, like Todd and I, we naturally kind of gravitate towards certain things in the organization that is just kind of like our backgrounds and kind of what we're most comfortable with. And so I think you need to make sure that you're investing in people who have done this before, who can build departments, who can build up teams. They've run, they've seen companies grow, and that might be kind of uncomfortable, right? Because if you think of, you think about you come out of this startup phase and like you've called all the shots, right? You've every decision you've made, you've called all the shots. You're the ultimate authority, and you're going to have to bring people in that are going to come maybe with challenging opinions and might push you in different directions. And you have to be open to that as a leader, to just recognize you don't know all the answers for this. There's no way you can do it all. So you've got to bring in people who have done it before, and it might be uncomfortable because they're going to be pushing you in directions that maybe you don't even want to be pushed in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The other thing would be, I'd say, and I've said this before, but I think it's really important to define your culture early and often. Like I said, we went through the first exercise. I think we were maybe like 15, 20 people when we first defined our culture. And it almost kind of felt silly then. We're like, why? We all work so well together. Why do we have to be sitting around talking about this? We all know what we're doing. But it's interesting, even when you're super small, going through that conversation, because you're like, well, wait a minute, you actually have a totally different idea of what we're doing than I do, right? You'll see differences in the way that people approach them. And that might be fine when you're 15 people. That's not okay when you're 50, 100 people. Like you really need to all come together and have consensus around what it is that you're trying to do. So define it, even though it might seem like it's like, is this really a good use of everybody's time? It is. It is really important to keep defining it, because it is going to keep evolving. And if people are not bought into it, it can cause big problems for the company. And then the last thing I would say is, have cash built up. Coming out of the startup phase, you run lean, right? And it's when you get into the growth phase, you're going to have to make investments as a company that are big for the company of your size. You're going to have to invest in systems and software and in people that maybe feel like a little ahead of the curve, right? Like, why are we spending so much money on, this ERP system? Like, we don't need this, but we're going to need it in a few years, and it takes years to get it where it needs to be. So
and it's easier to do it now when you're small before it's
yes.
totally established, and it will be later. So
yes, and it might feel like overkill, but have the resources and the financial flexibility to make those investments that might feel a little ahead. And I think that's where a lot of people often will get to the point where they're like, I can't do this. I have to go to a third party investor, or I have to go to a bank. And so if you maintain that flexibility yourself, you don't necessarily have to do that. And so, if you have that cushion built up where you can kind of get ahead of yourself a little bit to make those investments, they will pay off in the long run for sure, because you're going to be operating that much more efficiently, and it'll allow you to grow faster in the long run. So
which is counter to what a lot of people hear in Silicon Valley startups, where they're saying, spend, lean, reinvest everything. How do you avoid keeping any cash on hand, right? Is what you constantly hear from, the Silicon Valley startups. At least when I was out there talking with folks, that was what they always told me their biggest issue was.
Sure.
But then that short-sightedness meant that they would just need to continue to raise more money, right, to continue to grow.
Yeah, it's a good
Go
perspective for sure. And those are 3 great pieces of advice. So just to recap, Laure and Todd, you said invest in people who, have built things before, right? Departments, companies, strategies, so on. Define your culture early and often. Constantly be thinking about your culture, how it's going to change, evolve as the company grows, and have the cash built up. Prepare for those investments that are going to come as you enter that next phase of growth. I think those are all really, really great takeaways for our listeners. So, it's been an exciting, challenging, crazy, fun, positive year for us. What's next?
I mean, hopefully more of the same, right? I think we're going to continue to push the envelope with the product. We're going to continue to innovate on the product. We're going to continue to listen to what the customers are needing, evolving with them. I still am looking forward to those moments where I can be put on a phone call and somebody explaining what they need, and I can say, well, yeah, we have that already. You just click this button and push that button, and voila. But it's still always very exciting when you're like, oh, we don't quite solve that problem the best way yet. So then it becomes a fun challenge, right, to figure out how to do that. And then we overcome it, right, one way or another. And then I think our people, right, we're going to continue to grow this team, and we've already hired a handful of people this year, and their onboarding has started. I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
So further investments in people and the product.
Yeah. And we've got our, Courtney, as you're very aware of, we have our partner ecosystem that we launched last fall, that's going to continue to roll out this year. So lots of exciting things going on for our agency partners and our solution partners and integration partners and marketplaces coming. I'm really excited about things. There's so many interesting things that we can do to help them grow their businesses, and get even closer to CallTrackingMetrics and even get more and more value from it. So I think there's lots of interesting things that we'll be doing on that front this year. And also our enterprise. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say bringing people here to the office and having some gatherings where we can meet with these customers and partners in person and collaborate on site. Yeah. Sorry, Laure. Enterprise.
Yeah. And enterprise, that's something else that, something that we're as a company, spending a lot of time working on, is building up our suite of offerings for enterprise customers, because they need things that are slightly different from our, small businesses that might be customers of ours. And so how do we make sure that we've got the right level of support for them, the right pricing options, the right contracts, the right, just making sure that we've got all the pieces that they need, compliance that we're working on to make sure that we're ready to support them. And so we've got some wonderful enterprise customers now. We have a whole team now that's dedicated to enterprise customers, and we're relaunching our premium support offering, which is our kind of top tier support for our enterprise customers that need, dedicated support 24/7. We've got a great team working on providing, those services for our enterprise customers.
Very cool. So it sounds like we're just kind of taking everything to the next level. We're going to continue to invest in people, our product, our support teams, which we know are just, the best in the industry. Continue to kind of expand in new client strategies around partnership and enterprise, and just kind of dive into some new ways of nurturing and growing relationships there. All very exciting stuff. And it's been truly fun to be a part of the ride. So before we wrap everything up, Laure and Todd, is there anything else you'd like to plug?
I mean, I think we have some pretty cool speech analytics on the roadmap for this year as well. Pretty excited about that. It's on the horizon. So, yeah.
Always a highly requested feature.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
That and automation, of course. So, all good stuff.
Yes.
And as you said before, Todd, always listening to our customers about how we can get better. So, feedback's always appreciated. All right. Well, Laure and Todd, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Yeah. Much appreciate your time. It's really wonderful just to kind of hear part two of your story. Your journey has really been incredible. And of course, I wish you all the best moving forward. Thank you to our listeners too for your support. Keep in touch with us on Twitter at SmartRoutePod. Also be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can be the first one to know when our next episode drops. And that's it for Smart Route episode 13. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.